Vote fraud, 2016, 90 million votes. The Hillary Trump campaign conspiracy. 231 eligible to vote in this country. 130 actually voted. 90 million didn't. Let's discuss the history of voting, gerrymandering, districts, actual election rigging. I've already discussed one type, but we're going to talk about the biggest one. And we're going to talk about the census. But let's do this. I'm starting here because I'm going to start in this year. 1828. A surge in voter turnout because of the extension of suffrage. Some of you know what that word means, but only certain people are militant about it and scream about it in the streets. This was allowing white men to vote that were poor. If you didn't own land, you weren't allowed to vote before that date. So only landowners could vote. And a lot of the time, they would cast the ballot for everyone in the household, and that might even affect the local elections. And more importantly, sometimes they allowed their family and people working under them, plantation style, if you want to talk about it that way. That means their kids, by the way. I don't know if you know about this, but a lot of the workers on most small farms were your kids, and you just pay them. But they were allowed to not vote. But the head of the household would consult with everybody. There's a couple of pictures from era after that. But yeah, non-property owning white men were allowed to vote now. Yes, suffrage for white men. I just want to point that out. Let's just look at how screwed up our country was in ways that would absolutely annoy you if you had to deal with reality. Next, 1860 to 1880. 6 consecutive Republican victories. Coincidence? No, not related. I skipped a bunch of years here. I'm going to be skipping years. I'm skipping Ford. I'll mention them. Ford. Sorry, anyway, next. 1890 to 1810. There was a drop in voter turnout. Apathy? Maybe those were the new millennials, right? No. Southern states disenfranchised many poor white people and most African Americans based on them being poor. You might want to, I'm going to give you an answer what happened then, but people started doing something very tactical. But yeah, white people and black people. Poor. Hammer it into your skull and accept it. Next. Several states also decided to pass laws supporting women's suffrage, including one state that wasn't a state yet. It was a territory. They were literally the first one to do so. They did it before they became a state. In 1920, there was a surge because of the extension of women's suffrage nationally. But during that period of time before, it had been incremental. But once it became a national rule, there was a surge. 1924 study, however, of voting turnout for 1920's presidential election and the 1923, odd number, mayoral contest in Chicago showed that the females in that city were less likely to have visited the polls than men who refused to show up. They were the least likely out of people who abdicated any responsibility for this. The reasons they posted or said when they were asked, quote, 11% of them said a disbelief in women's voting. For various reasons. See also getting together as a family and picking your election. I watched that personally because my mother refused to vote without consulting everybody at the time in the family, which is just me and my dad. But they all decided, no, we're going to do an all or nothing like the states. I've been against the Electoral College since I was 7. Do you understand here? Okay, let's just go on. For various reasons, look up the year I was born. You'll find out in a minute. They're also more likely to cite a general indifference to politics and ignorance of it, or feeling overwhelmed or intimidated by trying to do the ballot. See how complicated voting ballots were in the 1920s. See also what else was going on during the 1920s. They were less likely to cite a fear of loss of business or wages or financial reasons. They just didn't wish to vote, or maybe they had something else they were doing, like running a household or helping run a business. This is actually something that was going on then. 1929 to 1930 something, the Great Depression, Dust Bowl, and all sorts of things happened during these periods of time. Just this, and there was a Second World War, and you might want to look into all this. 1932 through 1948, because all that and many, many more things, 5 consecutive Democratic victories. Roosevelt, most of the states, and Truman, a little over half. Yeah, there was also World War II. I've cited 2 periods of time where a person should reasonably have said the world's coming to an end for various reasons, and it didn't. Next time someone says the world's coming to an end for something far less intense than the Dust Bowl or the Great Depression, tell them they're an idiot confidently, and tell them to go read a damn history book or talk to some old people and shut up. I grew up with someone who grew up during the Dust Bowl and the Depression. Actually, 2 someones. No, they were in the middle of these things. But 5 consecutive Democratic victories after this. New Deal, blah, 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 blah. Was going to, we're leading up to these kind of ideas here. 1952 to 1956. I'm going to be skipping around, by the way, in a minute. Republican Dwight D. Eisenhower. 40-state landslide winner. I'm doing it states. I'll mention other things, but I'm basing this on the number of states taken. We're going to use our system, not the one that people are talking about a lot lately, including me. No, seriously, huge. Annoying orange with a guinea pig toupee. Huge hands. Next. No, his hands are huge now. 1960, JFK happened. He won by popular and electoral vote, but less than half the states, so it's not really a landslide. Because it's not. 1964, LBJ. He had a landslide. And then the systematic collection of voter turnout data by all sorts of stats, demographics for study. We're collecting this information for quality assurance. Thank you for your phone call. At a national level, they started actually doing this, including gender. Look up Madison Avenue and politics. I think there's an actual series of books and stories. 1968, Nixon happened. So did I. 1972, Nixon happened again with a 49-state landslide. Let's repeat that. Huge. 1974, Ford happened. Anyway, 1976, Carter happened. He's a Democrat. He won. That's all. This is, nobody really. He wasn't like jammed in. It's not Anyway, next. 1980 through 1984, Reagan landslides. What happened during that period of time? Look up transportation, look up all the crises caused from other countries. Look up pocketbooks and gas tanks. 1988, Bush landslide. It was. Then 1992, Clinton landslide. The other Clinton. No, not that. Not your other right. Not that right. Your other right. Got to do these jokes every day. Anyway, next. Year 2000. Bush had a per state and other landslide. It really was. But he had a minority vote. If one of these outweighs the other, you got to use the one that outweighs. That's why I'm not having a problem with this. When you look at the map, I'll include links to the maps. Seriously. No, he won. We may have lost, but we won. He won. It's 2004. Same ratio. And the majority ruled in his favor, too, so it was popular vote, too. 2008, landslip. He was meh. It was found at that point that income and education are significant factors affecting voter turnout, 3 times more likely to vote if you are well off and educated. Or you could just be well off, or just educated. poor and educated, or well off and stupid, will still work. Check your stereotypes at the door, because this applies across the board. Trust me, I'm going there. 2012, Obama won the election. Yeah, okay. Meh. Lots of meh going on. I'm skipping around here. 2016, per state, Trump had a landslide. It was an overwhelming majority. It must rule. But he did not win the majority of the popular vote, because he didn't. 90 million uncounted votes because they didn't bother voting. Fear or depression are the mind killer. Who promoted those things? Response to Michael Moore's 5 points of stupidity. Shut up. He said a couple of useful things. I'm going to have a video on that. I'm going to strip out his BS because it applies to both parties. And more accurately, it doesn't apply to both parties. It applies to everybody, Republican, Democrat, or other. I'm looking at you, Perot. And everybody should look back at Perot. Think about this for a minute. You could have had a Perot. You could have had a Bernie Sanders. You could have had a Mitt Romney. You could have had a Dukakis. But then again, we could have had a Wiener. Oh my God. Rule number 1 in politics, change your name to something normal sounding. Dukakis and Wiener. Oh my God. Seriously. Why the hell did you people show up in the... Oh God, not Wiener again. Anyway, not Wieners again for lunch and dinner and breakfast. Okay, now we're going to go on to something a little less controversial. I hope you can appreciate that I'm just laughing these days. I mean, this was an upset. There are all these upsets. There's all these things. Now we're going to go ahead and look ahead, not to tomorrow. I want you all to spend 10 minutes looking at riot videos. Now. Pause this video, go look at riot videos. Spend 10 minutes. Come back here after you're good and angry. Look up Sargon of Akkad and every other, quote, conservative rationalist out there that's also, they're liberals too. Rational people are the majority. I did an experiment. The majority of people responding to these videos are rational. Even when I don't filter. Who wants to keep it irrational and angry so you don't want to vote? Who wants to keep it status quo, which is based on this? And who's now stuck with it because they have a majority? The last time someone had a mass majority like that, it was the Democrats that did the same thing I'm going to talk about here. 2020, the first election where all millennial generation members will be eligible to vote. 18 to 45-year-olds will represent 40% of the population. Eligible voters. 15% will be Hispanic. Build that wall. Next. Hispanic Americans. Any party that wins an election just before any census will also win a significant advantage based on the results of that census. Why? Just like every other election before it that happened around a census, the U.S. House will redistribute the seats among the 50 states that would stay in effect until 2032. Another 10 years. Like the last 8, think. Elections. The states will conduct a redistricting of Congress and the state legislative districts. Then the governor, state legislator, and or redistricting commissions will redistribute and redistrict. You could have neat, trim boundaries that make intuitive sense, centered around population groups, or based on something rational, rather than confusing snarls of interlocked districts tangled and twisted like some orgy used to influence and maintain the status quo or rig elections. Districts that let politicians pick their voters rather than the other way around. Who said that? Dramatically non-compact districts that squiggle and squirm out in all different directions, evidence of lawmakers trying to bring far-flung voters into a single district in order to achieve a partisan mix that best favors their party of gerrymandering. But your politician will search for fig leaf justifications for this. They can always find one. Michael Moore is wrong. This is what you have to address. Thanks for watching. Have a good day, and good luck with all of those snow tires for the special snowflakes.